I sat at the small table by the window, trying to push down the knot in my stomach, but nothing would settle. The restaurant was busy, the clatter of dishes and chatter of customers filling the space, but the noise in my head drowned it all out. I hadn't seen my daughter in weeks, and I was trying to hold on to the hope that we could have a nice, quiet dinner together. That was the plan, wasn't it? Then I saw her. She was standing at the counter, laughing, but it wasn't the kind of laugh that makes you feel warm inside. It was harsh, cruel. She was mocking the waitress. I didn't recognize her face at first, but when she turned, my heart sank. It was the waitress. She looked young, maybe in her early 20s, but she had a certain grace about her that made me take a second glance. Her eyes were full of hurt, but she hid it well behind a forced smile. And then, that was when it hit me. The girl my daughter was mocking was her half-sister. My daughter didn't know that. My chest tightened. I felt the shock crawl through my veins, turning my blood cold. I had always tried to protect my children from things, shield them from things that would hurt them. But here, in this moment, I felt like a fool. My daughter's laughter echoed in my ears as I watched her taunt the woman who shared her blood. I wanted to scream, to rush over and grab her arm, to shake her and tell her the truth. But I didn't. I just sat there. I watched as the waitress, her half-sister, looked down, her face flushing red, embarrassed by my daughter's cruel words. My heart broke for her. She didn't know either. I stood up, my legs unsteady. My daughter had turned away from the counter, and I had a split second to decide what to do. The rage I felt toward her, the confusion, the hurt, it was all too much. I took a breath and walked over to the counter. The waitress was wiping down the table, but when she looked up, she met my eyes. It was like I could see the hurt she was hiding, but there was something else in those eyes, something I didn't understand. It wasn't just embarrassment. It was like she was waiting for me to say something. The words were stuck in my throat, and I could see her searching my face. I didn't know what to say. How could I explain to her, to both of them, how twisted the situation had become? But before I could speak, my daughter's voice broke through the noise. "Dad, what are you doing?" Her words were sharp, accusing. "Why are you talking to her?" I turned, the sting of her tone slicing into me. "You're embarrassing me," she snapped, her voice loud enough to catch the attention of the other patrons. "You're always doing this, always making a scene, making everything worse." She shook her head, not even looking at me. "I don't need this, especially not from you." My heart sank deeper into my chest. I had always tried to be there for her, to give her what she needed. How had things come to this? The waitress, her half-sister, remained silent, not knowing what to do or say. She glanced between me and my daughter, clearly uncomfortable. I felt my face flush with shame. I wanted to tell her everything, how she had a sister, how she was part of this family, but I couldn't. Not here, not now, not when my daughter was this angry, this blind to the truth. I stood there for a moment longer, feeling the weight of the past few years pressing down on me. This wasn't just about a dinner or an embarrassing moment. This was about something deeper, something I hadn't seen coming. I couldn't change what had happened, and now it felt like it was too late to fix it. My daughter's words continued to echo in my mind as I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I felt her eyes on me, cold and filled with resentment, but I couldn't face her. Not like this. When I left the restaurant that night, I didn't just leave behind a meal. I left behind the last shred of my hope. The connection I thought we had was gone, severed by a misunderstanding, by anger, by a lack of communication. But the part that hurt the most, I couldn't even tell my daughter the truth. How could I explain to her what she had just done? How could I make her see that her half-sister was right there, just a few feet away, someone who shared her blood, her history? But she didn't know, and I wondered how long it would take for her to find out. And what would she think of me then? As I stepped into the cold night air, the question lingered. What would you feel if your child mocked a family member without knowing their connection? It wasn't just about the public embarrassment. It was about the family we had lost and the truth we were too afraid to face. I remember the first time I sat beside my daughter, teaching her to sew. I can still see the way her small hands clumsily gripped the needle, the look of concentration on her face, as if this was a moment we could share together. It was one of those rare moments when everything felt right, when the world outside faded away, and it was just the two of us, making something together. She was just a child then, bright-eyed and eager to learn, just like I had been at her age, and I taught her, slowly, carefully, how to sew, how to thread the needle, how to make the stitches even. It wasn't about the finished product. It was about the time spent together, the lessons passed down. She laughed when the thread knotted, and I would chuckle too, telling her not to worry, that mistakes were part of learning. I held her hand, guiding it through the fabric, letting her feel the rhythm of the stitches. It was simple, but it was meaningful. I spent years teaching her not just how to sew, but how to care, how to put in the effort to make things whole, to nurture what was fragile, to see the beauty in the process. These were lessons I thought were universal, that she would carry with her. I taught her that family meant something more than blood. It meant care, it meant effort, it meant sacrifice, and I did it with everything I had. When my wife passed away, the world seemed to stop. I remember the emptiness that filled the house, the silence where laughter used to be. But I had my daughters. They were my reason to keep going. My older daughter had always been close to me, but it was my younger one, my baby, who I leaned on the most. She was still so young, and I needed to be strong for her. And in return, I gave everything I had to keep our family connected, to fill the gaps that her mother's absence had left behind. I sewed the family back together, in a way. It wasn't always easy. There were moments when I could see the weight of growing up settling on her shoulders. But I made sure we kept our traditions alive. Birthdays, holidays, even the small moments that would have slipped by unnoticed. I made sure to mark them. I stitched our lives together with the little things, the meals, the stories, the times we spent laughing together. The piano, the music, the sewing. These were my threads. They were my love. I remember one year I sewed a quilt for her. It wasn't anything grand, but it was something that spoke to us. I stitched her favorite colors, the ones I had come to know so well, and I made sure it was soft, warm, something she could wrap herself in whenever she felt down. She loved it. She hugged me tight when I gave it to her. That was all I needed. A simple gesture, a simple moment of joy. It was enough for me. I thought I was enough for her. But now, as I sit here thinking back, I wonder, how did we go from that warm hug to the cold, bitter mockery in the restaurant? Where did the threads of connection begin to unravel? My mind drifts back to that moment when I watched her mock the waitress, her half-sister, without even realizing who she was. It felt like everything we had built together was suddenly meaningless. All the effort, all the time I spent, all the love. I watched her throw it away in an instant. And for what? A moment of superiority? A moment where she felt she could distance herself from the people she once cared for? I want to understand what happened. I want to believe that she didn't mean it. But as the days go by, I can't shake the feeling that something has changed. Something deep inside her. Something influenced her. The daughter I knew, the one who would have cherished the effort I put into her quilt, who would have laughed with me as we sewed together, is not the same person who mocked a woman she had no idea was family. I can't help but feel that somewhere along the way, the lessons I tried to teach her were lost. The effort, the care, none of it seems to matter now. And I wonder, as I reflect on all those quiet, simple moments we shared, what went wrong, what changed. But I still hold on to the memory of the quiet moments. I hold on to the love I put into those lessons. Because no matter how much time passes, no matter how much she's changed, those moments of connection will always be real to me. And I'll keep them close, even if she won't. The distance between my daughter and I began to creep in slowly, like a fog, subtle at first, but heavy and unyielding as the days went on. It wasn't an overnight change, but looking back, I can see how it unfolded. At first, it was just the little things. Her not answering my calls as quickly, her late-night texts becoming fewer. The visits to my house grew farther apart, the laughs we once shared becoming whispers of memories, fading further away with each passing week. I tried not to let it bother me at first. After all, she was growing up, starting her own life. But soon I realized it was more than that. It wasn't just about her becoming independent. It was the quiet coldness that had taken root between us. Unspoken, but ever present. She stopped confiding in me the way she once did. When I asked about her life, her new job, or her friends, the answers came quickly, but they were always surface level. She never seemed eager to share anymore. The more she distanced herself, the more I questioned myself. Had I done something wrong? Was I too overbearing? Too concerned with making sure she followed the right path? I was never the kind of father to push her too hard, but I did want what was best for her. Was that the problem? Was my care now seen as control? There were times when I would ask her if something was wrong, if she needed help, but she would brush me off, as though the conversation was too much of a burden for her. "I'm fine, Dad," she'd say with a strained smile. But her eyes always told a different story. I knew she wasn't fine, but every attempt to break through the wall she was building felt like I was pushing her further away. Then it happened, that night, when we had dinner together, and she suddenly confronted me about my controlling ways. It was sharp, unexpected. The words cut through the room like a blade. "You've always been overbearing, always telling me what to do," she said, her voice louder than usual. "I never had a choice. You made decisions for me." I sat there, stunned. The air felt thick, the tension almost unbearable. My heart sank as I listened to her accusations. I had never meant to control her. All I'd ever done was try to guide her, to make sure she didn't make the same mistakes I did. But in her eyes, all my efforts had twisted into something unrecognizable, something suffocating. "I wasn't trying to control you," I said softly, trying to find the right words, the truth that might help her see. I was only trying to help. But she wouldn't hear it. Her eyes, which had once been filled with trust and affection, now seemed cold, accusing. And it wasn't just what she said. It was the way she said it. As though everything I had done, every sacrifice, every moment spent supporting her, had been a mistake, a failure. I wanted to defend myself. I wanted to explain all the times I had been there for her, how I had worked late nights to support her education, how I had stayed up sewing, making sure she had the things she needed. But the words felt useless, like they would never reach her. She wasn't listening anymore. She had already made up her mind, and that was the most painful part. There was a small flicker of hope deep down that maybe, just maybe, I could fix this. But as I looked at her, her face hardened and distant, I began to understand. There was nothing I could say that would make her hear me. Nothing that would erase the distance she had created between us. And it wasn't just her. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that there was someone else in the background, someone who had shaped her view of me, who had made her think I was the villain. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but it was hard to ignore the subtle signs. A few days before this confrontation, I had overheard her talking on the phone, her tone harsh, the words she used cutting me down as if she had been fed a narrative that wasn't hers. It was clear now. Someone had put these thoughts into her head. Someone who didn't understand the love I had for her, the sacrifices I had made. Someone who saw me as a threat, a problem, and I couldn't help but feel the weight of it all. The weight of being misunderstood by the very person I had loved most, the one I had given everything for. I felt helpless, powerless in a way I hadn't experienced before. I had given so much to her, and yet here we were. A daughter who saw me as a burden, someone who had controlled her life, someone who couldn't see the love I had always tried to show. In that moment, I realized that there would be no easy resolution, no quick fix, no magical words that would make everything right again. There was a rift, a wound between us, and I wasn't sure how or if it could ever heal. The fear settled deep within me. What had I done wrong? What could I have done differently? And as I watched her walk away, the weight of the distance between us seemed heavier than ever. I received a message that shook me more than I expected. An old acquaintance, someone who had known my daughter in passing through school and community events, reached out quietly. She had noticed something I had been sensing but couldn't fully articulate. The distance, the stress, the subtle withdrawal that had crept into our lives over the past months. At first, I hesitated to respond. Why would anyone else's observation matter? But as I read her words, I felt a tightening in my chest. She spoke of my daughter's secrecy, her internal struggle, the pressure she carried that was invisible to most. She described how my daughter avoided interactions, not just with me, but with others who cared for her, how she seemed burdened by something unspoken. The messages weren't alarmist. They were measured, careful, but each detail aligned uncomfortably with my own observations. I remembered that night in the restaurant, the embarrassment I felt, the coldness in her glance. The timeline the observer laid out matched perfectly with the moments I had felt her drift away. It was validation I hadn't dared hope for, and yet it brought a deep, painful sorrow. I had known she was struggling, but hearing it confirmed by someone outside our immediate family made the hurt sharper, the gap wider. She also hinted at the forces shaping my daughter's behavior. A partner, a friend, someone in her social circle had begun influencing how she perceived me. Suddenly, the accusations, the coldness, the misunderstandings, they were not purely her own. They had been guided, twisted subtly by voices I couldn't reach. I felt a mix of fear and heartbreak. Fear that the narrative she had adopted was no longer her own, heartbreak at realizing the isolation she must have felt carrying these burdens alone. The observer didn't just confirm what I feared, she illuminated it, showing me the unseen pressure my daughter bore that had driven a wedge between us. It was uncomfortable, this confirmation. Validation, while relieving in some ways, carried a heavy weight. Knowing that she had been influenced by others made me question every interaction, every conversation I had tried to salvage. I wanted to reach out, to correct the misconceptions, to remind her of the truth I had lived for her. Yet, the awareness of external influence complicated every intention. How could I hope to bridge the gap if there were invisible hands shaping her perspective? It was a cruel twist. Truth entangled with false narratives. Love overshadowed by manipulation. As I read the last of the messages, I felt a strange mixture of sorrow and clarity. The sorrow came from the undeniable realization that her actions were not entirely her own. Yet still, the pain I felt was real. The embarrassment, the betrayal, the emotional distance, they had been magnified by forces beyond my control. I could mourn what had been lost, but I could not fight the unseen pressure that had guided her steps away from me. Each sentence in the message carved into my awareness the truth I had suspected but could not confirm. My daughter had been struggling, conflicted, pressured, and I had been blind to the full extent until now. I reflected on the subtle signs I had overlooked, the hurried excuses, the muted responses, the fleeting moments of guilt that passed too quickly. The observer's insights cast these tiny actions in a new light. They were not mere rebellion or indifference. They were markers of a deeper, invisible strain. It was validation of my own instincts as a parent. Yet it carried no comfort. The clarity brought its own pain, the recognition that my daughter's drift was partly born of influence, partly of her own misperceptions, and entirely beyond what I could easily mend. In the quiet aftermath of reading her words, I understood the depth of my daughter's struggle. Her choices, her coldness, her public mockery, they were symptoms, not the entirety of her character. Yet, the moral and emotional weight fell upon me. How could I approach her now? How could I navigate a relationship that had been subtly redirected by others, where love and misunderstanding intertwined so tightly? I was left with sorrow, a mixture of grief and validation, and a heavy sense of moral responsibility to act carefully, yet wisely. It was a lesson in the unseen battles children may face, and the silent, painful consequences parents endure when their care is misunderstood. Would you trust a stranger who saw your child's struggles more clearly than you did? I asked myself, the question lingering, heavy, and uncomfortably urgent. The answer felt impossible to grasp fully, yet it anchored me in a profound understanding of the fractured truth. I had never imagined that the very people my daughter trusted could have painted me in such a distorted light. The acquaintance who had reached out earlier returned with more insight, gently revealing what I had suspected but feared to name. She told me how my daughter's partner and a close friend had described me as controlling, overbearing, a figure who limited her choices at every turn. Hearing it articulated so plainly made my chest tighten. I had spent decades supporting her, guiding her, making sacrifices quietly and with love, and yet someone else had convinced her otherwise. These revelations forced me to revisit the past. Every suggestion I had made, every small boundary I had set, every lesson or advice I had offered with her best interests at heart had been twisted. My guidance, once meant to protect, to nurture, to shape her understanding of the world, had been recast as manipulation in her eyes. I could feel the bitterness that had been quietly building inside her, fueled by misperception and the careful nudges of others. It was subtle, yet cumulative. Every misinterpreted action became another thread weaving a tapestry of resentment. The observer's words were clear. My daughter was caught in a web of loyalty and shame. She felt torn between honoring the relationships she had now built, her partner, her social circle, and reconciling with the truth of her upbringing. Each decision, each glance, each tone of voice was being filtered through a lens she no longer fully controlled. And I realized, with a heavy heart, that her distance was not simply rebellion or forgetfulness. It had been meticulously cultivated by those around her, reinforcing false narratives about my character. I felt a rising fear then, a protective instinct that had been dormant, while I struggled to understand the distance myself. This was more than hurt feelings. It was a threat to the fragile bond that remained. I wanted to defend myself, to explain, to dismantle the lies, piece by piece. But I also understood that a direct confrontation could push her further away, entrench her in the very narratives I longed to correct. The conflict within me was sharp. How to assert the truth without shattering her further. How to protect her emotionally while also preserving my dignity. Memories flooded back. Tiny moments of joy now shadowed by the weight of misinterpretation. A careful word misread, a gesture ignored, a plan offered and recast as restriction. I saw clearly now how these accumulated into the silent wall that had grown between us. Each interaction that had once been simple now carried the echo of false accusations, the residue of manipulated perceptions. The realization made my heart ache. The one I had always sought to nurture and support had been quietly shaped into seeing me as a source of constraint, not love. Yet even in this clarity, I felt sorrow for her as much as for myself. She was navigating pressures she did not fully understand, balancing loyalty, shame, and a sense of self dictated by others' influence. It was a cruel form of miseducation, one that left her in conflict with the very person who had devoted a lifetime to her well-being. I felt moral outrage, a righteous anger, tempered by a deep protective instinct. I could not allow her to bear this misunderstanding unchallenged, yet I could not harm her in the process of correction. I reflected on my own role, recognizing that even the most careful intentions could be misread when filtered through external manipulation. It was not negligence, nor was it malice. It was circumstance, compounded by voices she trusted. I had to navigate this carefully, to honor her autonomy while safeguarding the truth. Each thought weighed on me, a tightrope of moral responsibility and emotional endurance. The observer's insights left me with an unshakable understanding. The distance, the resentment, the public embarrassment, they were not born of her alone. They were cultivated, guided, and distorted. And as the evening settled into a quiet reflection, I realized the challenge ahead. How to untangle the lies she believed, while preserving the fragile bond that had survived this far. The burden was heavy, the path unclear, but the clarity of truth was now mine to hold carefully. The night after the incident at the restaurant, I couldn't sleep. Thoughts swirled in my head, a relentless cycle of regret and confusion. I had to try to make her understand, try to mend the rift that had widened between us. So I arranged for a meeting, a safe space, just the two of us. I wanted to explain, to clear the air, to heal the wounds that I feared might be irreparable. But when the time came, I had no idea what I was walking into. She agreed to meet, but there was a noticeable distance in her voice, the kind of distance you can't see but can feel, like an invisible wall growing between us with every word she said. We sat at the small table in the corner of the living room. The silence stretched before I spoke. I wanted to make this right, but I knew, deep down, this conversation might not go as I hoped. I don't know what you think of me right now, I began, my voice low, careful. But I need you to understand. That day, at the restaurant, I didn't mean to embarrass you. I wasn't neglecting you. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Her gaze dropped to the table, her hands tightly clasped together. She wasn't looking at me. Not really. I could see the walls she'd built, brick by brick, in her eyes. You don't get it, do you? She replied, her voice tight, guarded. I've always felt like you were controlling my life, the way you always tried to guide me, the decisions you made for me without asking. I don't know who you are anymore. My chest tightened at her words, but I fought to keep my composure. I had spent years trying to be the best father I could be. I didn't want to control her life. I wanted to help her navigate it, protect her from the mistakes I'd made. But I hadn't communicated that, had I? I've always wanted what's best for you, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I wanted to be there for you, to guide you through things, like when you were growing up, and I taught you how to play the piano. I never meant for you to feel like I was controlling you. She pulled her hands away from the table, her posture defensive. You don't understand, she said, her voice trembling. I never asked for all of that. I never asked you to decide what was best for me. I don't need you to make decisions for me anymore. The sting of her words hit me like a slap in the face, but I didn't flinch. This wasn't about me. It was about her. I had to understand that. I didn't try to control you, I said. my voice softer now. I was just trying to protect you. I thought that was what a father should do. I wanted you to be safe, to succeed, to be happy. But that's the problem, she shot back, shaking her head. You always thought you knew what was best for me. You never really listened. And now, I feel trapped. Her words hung in the air like a weight I couldn't lift. I had spent so much time trying to guide her, but maybe I hadn't truly listened. Maybe I hadn't understood what she needed from me. The realization was painful, a quiet truth I wasn't ready to face. I'm sorry if I made you feel that way, I said, my voice breaking slightly. I never wanted to make you feel trapped. I just wanted to be there for you, to help however I could. But she wasn't hearing me. She had already built her version of the truth, and no matter how hard I tried to dismantle it, she wasn't ready to listen. I think you're missing the point, she replied, her voice cold now, her arms crossed tightly in front of her. I don't need your help anymore. I'm fine on my own. And just like that, the distance grew even wider. I could see the pain in her eyes, but I could also see her anger, her frustration with me. She wasn't the same person I had raised. She was someone new, someone I didn't know how to reach. The conversation crumbled in front of me. She wasn't ready to hear my side. She wasn't ready to understand. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't fully grasped before. Maybe I couldn't fix this. Maybe the only thing I could do now was step back, give her the space she needed, and accept that some things would remain broken. The silence that followed was deafening. I wanted to say more, to explain, to fix things, but I knew there was nothing left to say. My heart ached as I watched her retreat, the space between us now filled with years of miscommunication, missed opportunities, and regret. It was clear now. She wasn't ready for the truth, and neither of us were ready to heal. It's strange how the hardest truths often come out in the quietest moments. She didn't look me in the eye when she started speaking. Her voice was barely a whisper, like she was afraid of the words, even as they left her mouth. I didn't want to hurt you, she said. Her hands trembled slightly, and I saw the fight she was having with herself. It wasn't easy for her to say this. I could see it. I waited for her to continue, but the silence hung heavy between us, thick with years of unspoken feelings. Finally, she spoke again, her words laced with something I couldn't quite place. I was wrong about you, she admitted. I thought you were trying to control everything in my life, but I misunderstood so much. Her voice cracked, and I could see a tear welling up in her eye. I thought that you were trying to take away my independence. I thought you were trying to make decisions for me. I felt a lump rise in my throat, but I forced it down. This wasn't about me. It was about her. She had suffered, and I had missed it. I was wrong, she repeated, her voice shaky now. I let others tell me things about you. They painted a picture of you that wasn't real. They made me believe you were controlling me, keeping me from living my life the way I wanted to. I didn't see it at the time, but now I do. I could feel the heat rise in my chest. Anger, hurt, betrayal, but not at her. No, at the people who had shaped her perceptions, who had poisoned her mind without knowing the truth. My own daughter, manipulated, twisted by voices that weren't mine. I wanted to shout, to defend myself, but I knew that wasn't the answer. Who told you that? I asked softly, trying to keep my voice steady. Who told you that I was controlling? Who made you believe that? She wiped her eyes, taking a shaky breath. My friends and my boyfriend, she said, barely above a whisper. They said you were holding me back, that I needed to break free from you. I guess I listened to them more than I listened to you. I felt a pang of sorrow deep in my gut. How had I let it get to this point? I had always thought I was protecting her, guiding her, doing what I thought was best. But I had never realized the damage that could come from my actions being misunderstood, from my own love being misinterpreted as control. I never wanted to hold you back, I said, my voice barely audible now. I've always wanted the best for you, always. But maybe I didn't show it the way you needed. Maybe I didn't listen enough, and for that, I'm sorry. She shook her head quickly, as though she couldn't bear the apology. No, it's not just you, she said, taking a deep breath, the words coming faster now. I was angry at you, and I let that anger shape everything. I didn't want to see what you were doing for me. I didn't want to see your sacrifices. I was too caught up in my own life, in my own confusion, and I shut you out. My heart ached. This wasn't what I had expected. I had spent so many nights wondering what had gone wrong, why she had pulled away. But hearing it from her now, hearing how much she had struggled, how much fear had driven her, how many misunderstandings had built up between us, it broke something inside me. I was afraid, she said quietly. I was afraid that if I let you in too much, I'd lose myself. I didn't want to depend on you. I didn't want to feel like I couldn't stand on my own. I wanted to reach out to her, to hold her. But I knew this wasn't the time for that. She needed space. She needed to come to her own realizations. I thought you were trying to tell me how to live, she went on. But really you were just trying to help. I didn't see it. I thought I had to break free from you to be myself. There it was. The crux of it. Fear. Misunderstanding. A fear that had clouded her judgment. A fear that I hadn't even known she was carrying. All these years, I had thought I was losing her because of my own actions. But it wasn't my actions at all. It was hers. Her fear. Her own battle to feel independent. To be her own person. And I had been caught in the middle, not realizing I was the one she was pushing away because I loved her too much. I didn't know how to be a parent to you anymore, I admitted, my voice trembling slightly. I didn't know how to protect you without making you feel trapped. And that was my fault. I should have done better. I should have listened more. She wiped her eyes again, looking at me with a mixture of sadness and regret. I'm sorry, she said softly. I'm sorry for pushing you away. I didn't know what else to do. I sat there, a quiet sadness settling over me. And for the first time in a long while, I felt the distance between us start to shrink. It wasn't fixed, not yet. But maybe, just maybe, we could start to heal. We both had wounds. And while I couldn't change the past, I knew one thing for sure. I had to be patient with her and with myself. I still remember the look on her face when she mocked the waitress. It wasn't just the words that cut deep. It was the casual cruelty, the way she assumed she was in control of the situation, dismissing another person so easily. And then, when I saw the waitress turn away, I could have sworn I saw a flicker of recognition in her eyes, but it was gone too quickly for me to hold on to. What I didn't know then was that the woman she was mocking was her half-sister, the daughter she never knew about. The waitress didn't know that either. The secret, buried for years, was about to reveal itself, but not in the way I ever imagined. After everything had unfolded, I couldn't help but wonder if I had just told her sooner, if I had just been more open about everything. Maybe she wouldn't have felt so lost in her own anger. Maybe I could have spared her the hurt that came with not knowing her family, her history. Maybe we wouldn't have ended up here, with a fractured relationship, with so much left unsaid between us. But could I have really saved her from this? Could I have done anything differently, knowing how easily influence could warp her perception of me? The thought kept eating away at me, whether or not to reveal the truth to her. Would telling her that the woman she mocked was her sister, her half-sister, make things better? Or would it make everything worse? Would it add to the weight of what was already lost between us? Would it even matter anymore? She'd always been so sure of herself, so certain that her version of things was the right one. Even when I tried to explain, she couldn't hear me. She couldn't see past her own pain, her own misunderstandings. I'm not even sure if telling her the truth would change anything, but I'm scared it might just drive her away even further. Would the truth heal or fracture us beyond repair? That's what I've been asking myself ever since that day. It's strange, isn't it? How the smallest things, a look, a word, a moment of misunderstanding, can break the bond between two people who once loved each other. I've been left with so many unanswered questions about how things could have been different. But one thing is clear. I can't force her to see things my way. I can't make her accept the truth if she's not ready to. Now, I'm standing at the crossroads, caught between what's right and what's best for her. Should I keep the secret, letting her believe what she believes? Or should I expose the truth and risk losing her completely? I can feel the weight of that choice pressing down on me. I've learned that sometimes the hardest thing to do is let go of what you thought you could fix. Sometimes the most loving thing is to accept that you cannot change the past and you cannot change someone else's heart. But you can set boundaries. You can protect your own dignity, even when others don't understand. As I sit here reflecting on everything, I realize that there is no easy answer. There's no neat resolution. The world will keep turning, and the silence between us will remain for now. But that doesn't mean I have to stop caring, or stop hoping for a day when the distance between us will close. Maybe we'll never get that reunion, the one I've been dreaming of for so long. Maybe I'll never get to tell her everything I wish I could. But what I've learned through all this is that sometimes you can't force the truth into someone's heart. Sometimes you have to wait and hope they'll see it for themselves. So I sit here, still holding on to my memories and my love for her, knowing that the truth may never come. But that doesn't mean the story is over. It just means we're still waiting, still living, still hoping. But for now, That's all I can do. Should I reveal the truth, or let silence preserve the world she believes? That's the question I carry with me, even as I find my own peace with it all.